Welcome to DIY with Nancy. Today I'm going to share with you my recipe for apple cinnamon cake. I love the apple cinnamon combination. It reminds me of a coffee cake. It's very simple but yet so delicious, and it's simple to make. So stay with me and watch how to make my apple cinnamon cake step by step. To make my delicious apple cinnamon cake in a bowl, I'm starting off with 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. And to that, I'm adding 2 eggs. Now I'm going to use my handheld mixer to combine the eggs and the sugar until I get a light creamy mixture. I've been mixing for about a minute. I have a light creamy mixture. At this point, I'm going to add a 1/3 cup of melted unsalted butter. And I'm going to keep mixing. And I'm going to now add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now I love this recipe because I can add as I'm mixing. So I'm going to continue mixing. Once it comes together, at this point, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of plain yogurt. And this yogurt is just plain. There's no flavor in it. Now that's all for the wet ingredients. And now I'm ready to add the dry ingredients. For the dry ingredients, I'm going to sift in 2 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm also going to add 1 tablespoon of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Now I'm just going to sift all of the dry ingredients right into the wet batter. And see those little lumps? I want to avoid that. Make sure all the dry ingredients are in the bowl. And now I'm going to mix the wet and dry ingredients until it forms my cake batter. And I always have a spatula ready to scrape down the sides of the bowl to make sure that the ingredients are well combined. I'm going to use my handheld mixer to give it another 30-second mix. Make sure it's well combined. And now at this point, I'm ready to move on to the next step. Here's the next ingredient, 2 small Honeycrisp apples. I've also used Gala apples, but I find Honeycrisp apples are a lot juicier, so you'll get a very moist cake. And I always like to use a paring knife to remove the peel from these apples. It just works out perfectly. Now for the next step, I'm going to grate the apples. Just using a grater, I'm going to simply grate the apples just as I'm doing here. And once I get to the core of the apple, I'm going to discard it and continue grating the other apple. Okay, so that was a 2-minute process. I have my apples grated and I'm ready to move on to the next step. I'm going to add the grated apples to the cake batter. And I'm simply going to use my spatula to incorporate the grated apples into the cake batter. Just by adding the grated apples, you can see how nice and fluffy this cake batter is. And it hasn't even gone into the oven. Now, let's move on to the next step. Now to bake my apple cinnamon cake, I'm going to place it in a 9-inch springform pan. I'm going to use about a teaspoon of unsalted butter and 1 teaspoon of all-purpose flour. And I'm just going to butter the sides and the bottom of the springform pan, which you can see I have parchment paper there. And once I have all of the pan buttered, I'm going to sift in the teaspoon of all-purpose flour, which I want to coat all around the bottom and the sides of the pan, just as I'm doing here. Now to ensure that the pan is evenly coated, I'm just going to simply turn it around, make sure that the sides and bottom are evenly coated, and to remove any excess flour that's not needed, gently tap it, and voila, it's ready for the cake batter. Pour the cake batter into the cake pan. And at this point, I do have my oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that I have the cake batter in the cake pan, I'm ready to move on to the last and final step. Now for the final step, I'm going to prepare a topping for the apple cinnamon cake. I'm going to start off with 1 teaspoon of brown sugar and 1 teaspoon of powdered sugar. Now with a spoon, just going to combine the brown sugar and the powdered sugar. And for the last and final step, simply going to drizzle the combination of brown sugar and powdered sugar right onto the cake, and it's going to give it this nice crispy coating on top of the cake. And now it's ready to go into the oven. I'm going to bake it at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for approximately 35 to 40 minutes. And here it is, my apple cinnamon cake is out of the oven. I'm just gonna let it cool for about 15 minutes, remove it out of the pan, cut into it, and show you what it looks like. Now it's time to cut into this delicious apple cinnamon cake. Now the knife cutting through it, the texture is just perfect. Look at this. Beautiful texture. It's very moist. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like right in the center. Look at that. This is just a perfect moist apple cinnamon cake. There you have it, everyone. That's how I make my apple cinnamon cake. I love this recipe. It's so simple. The cake is so tasty and delicious. It's a very moist cake, and I hope you enjoy the recipe. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Take care. I just bite into it. It's so moist.